Hello everyone and welcome to this new video. Today we will continue our excursus on the history of psychology by going to analyze a new current of thought, cognitivism. Last time we had left off by analyzing behaviorism, and we had seen how this current took into consideration precisely both animal and human behavior by analyzing it with the stimulus-response association. Instead, today we are going to analyze cognitivism, as I said, which is a current of thought that developed around the 50s, and that brings the mind back to the center of study and interest from a psychological point of view. Basically, cognitivism considers the mind as an active processor of information, but since it is a very diverse current of thought to which so many authors refer, there is no real founding father of this current, although then conventionally Neisser's work Cognitive Psychology from 1967 is considered somewhat the manifesto precisely of cognitivism. As I mentioned earlier, however, this current of thought of cognitivism has its roots several years earlier than Neisser's work of 1967. In fact, as early as the 50s it began to develop, taking a bit of a foundation from what was behaviorism, although it later broke away from it considerably. In fact, as we had already analyzed well in the other video, for behaviorists, psychology must be limited to observing behaviors and to the strict relationship that there is between the stimulus-response connection, while for cognitivists, who in any case accept this basic scheme, it is much more important to go and analyze the active process that the subject carries out from the moment he says about the stimulus to the moment he will give his response. It then becomes essential for cognitivists to place the focus of attention on the mind, and it can, for these scholars, be studied. Its functioning can be studied through hypothetical models of reference. It can be said that the forerunner of all this thinking was a certain Kenneth Craik, who as early the 40s hypothesized that the functioning of the mind could be compared to that of certain tools, but it is only because of the advent and arrival of computers that it has been possible for cognitivists to study just how the mind works, comparing it somewhat to a computer. In fact, for cognitivists, the mind can really be seen as a computer that from the outside receives stimuli through the senses that are called input, that is, data that are stored and then can succeed at the time they are needed in the form of output. This computer-like model of the mind is called H.I.P, Human Information Processing, and was first elaborated and carried out by two scholars named Atkinson and Shiffrin. Obviously then, over time, it has undergone some transformations, innovations, and especially revisions made by other scholars and other psychologists, but basically it works as I had mentioned earlier, that is, the mind through its senses captures inputs from the outside world, then it considers them, makes them its own, and stores them. The moment it is then important that they succeed outside because they can serve all these elements that have been stored, they turn under output and are returned outside. Exactly like a computer, we think that when we store data in a computer, we enter 500 names and then the computer makes them succeed, for example, in alphabetical order. Basically what happens in our mind. We capture these stimuli from the outside world. Somehow our mind performs operations to organize them and to return a response outward, thus causing effects on the environment itself. This cognitivist approach is very interesting because it has made it possible experimentally and also in the laboratory to go and study so many functions of the mind, study them separately, and go and try to understand what the dynamics are, for example, memory, attention, learning, and perception. Another very important aspect of this approach is that precisely because of its structure, its being so dynamic and its physiognomy, it has allowed the interdisciplinarity of psychology with so many other areas of study and knowledge, such as neuroscience, linguistics, and philosophy. Conversely, however, some scholars also realized that this approach had limitations in that if one compares the mind to these abstract and unconcrete models, then tries to explain the mind with these abstract and unconcrete models, one can fall into the error then of separating the mind itself from the environment in which the individual comes to interact and performs precisely all of its cognitive functions. To summarize this cognitivist approach in its most salient points, therefore, we can say that cognitivism has as its object of interest the mental process of processing that each individual performs in taking these stimuli from the outside world and transforming them into output and then into response. Basically, how one goes from stimuli to responses. And as its goal, instead, it has to understand how the mind works and how it is able to process information. Basically, the general algorithm by which the mind operates and guides all human behavior can be summarized in the work of three great scholars. The 1960 work entitled Unity TOTE, written by Miller, Galanter, and Pribram. In this title, Unity TOTE, TOTE stands for the acronym Test, Operate, Test, Exit. According to this representation, any individual who must perform an action or otherwise is faced with a problem, whether simple or complex, performs a series of operations in sequence to solve precisely this problem. The first point, the test point, is where the subject examines the situation and correlates it with the intended purpose. Then there is the second point, which is the operate. The word itself says it, operate, operations. The mind implements a series of operations precisely by virtue of achieving the purpose. Then there is the third point, which is the test, where the mind again analyzes the situation. Then there is the fourth point, which is the exit point, in which the mind, if it has achieved its purpose, can end the sequence we have just seen. Well, with this discourse on cognitivism, which sees the mind exactly as a computer capable therefore of storing, as we have said, data from the outside world, input, and then making it succeed at the time it is needed in the form of a response, output, my work today is finished, I salute you, thank you for your attention, and refer you to the next one.